Welcome back to the Ed Morrissey Show podcast. There's my partner in crime, the Prince of Twitter, the Regent of RedState.com, the top Swifty of Town Hall Media, Supreme Swifty. I got to get the alliteration correct. He's the Supreme Swifty of Town Hall Media, Andrew.
That's Prince. Let's see, Prince of Twitter, Red State, Region of Red State, and Supreme Swifty. Yeah, that works.
Or steward of Swifty Nation. We can do that too. Oh my goodness. You know, Andrew, there's a certain sort of interesting thing about having two guys our age discuss Taylor Swift.
Yeah, right. Well, I was so bored and a little bit angry over all the crap that's been going on and the house fights and of course there's wars going on, which and I was looking around for something different, and I realized that I had tuned in from time to time on the recent Taylor Swift news and her incredibly successful tour. I mean, she's going to pull down $4 billion out of this, which is okay. Wow. And she handed out $100,000 bonuses or thank you notes to her 40 semi-truck drivers who haul that stage extravaganza around. And then there was the football thing, and the NFL audience went up whenever she was at a game. And I thought, well, this is kind of fun. And I don't know anything about her music, but I do know that she has this perky, positive. I've yet to hear any terrible drug stories about her. This positive energy. And you see her on stage relating to people in the front row. She did a 3-hour show in a downpour because the audience was in the downpour. So she kept it up, and her costume and her hair was ruined. And then I realized that a few years ago, a friend of mine who works on a morning TV talk show said that he had to work late because Taylor Swift was the guest. And of course, the audience, it's mainly women, was packed. And when the show ended, Taylor Swift didn't leave. She ran into the audience with like 250 women, and she stayed as long as anyone wanted a selfie. No cameras, no nothing. She just stayed as long as anyone wanted to chat, take a selfie, get an autograph, and then she left. And I thought, boy, this is really investing in building fans as opposed to just accepting all the accolades. And then I found online a video, but a personal video that someone had posted where she randomly picked 100 fans and invited them to her house. I guess it's in LA, but invited them to her house for an advance listen on her new album, which was months before release. And the video was her all in casual clothes and sitting on the couch with a whole bunch of women, and her feet were up and they were laughing and doing dancing and singing and stuff. And I thought she really seemed to be enjoying herself. Now, I know showbiz is, if you can fake sincerity, you've got it made. But
well, Samuel Goldwyn quote, which may or may not be apocryphal, but certainly fits Samuel Goldwyn to a T.
Yeah, exactly. But, I think it was him who also said after one of his movies was a bust, and he said, well, if they don't want to come, you can't stop them.
Right.
And anyway, she just was so fresh and clean. And I looked around, and there were some, clips of her on talk shows. And Jimmy Fallon, who I I can't abide, but he had a video of her when she was under painkillers after LASIK surgery. And she was talking all silly and eating a banana, and she was so self-deprecating, which is I learned in politics, is a very powerful tool.
It is.
And she was, and took the joking with laughter, and so I thought, gee, that's really kind of nice, and we don't see much of it or hear much of it, at least on the political stage. And I thought, well, I think I'll write about that, because there was a plethora of recent polls about how anxious people are, how they dislike Congress. I think the approval rating was 13%. And the Democrats in Congress, their approval went from 22 to 10% approval in 1 month. And I know there was just so much that evidence that people were unhappy and bored and anxious. And I thought, well, here's a nice little contrast. So I wrote about it, and there's a lot of Taylor Swift haters.
Yeah.
The people who have to crap on something that's fun, which is great, as long as they click. I don't care.
Well, yeah. I mean, so, clearly I am not the target demo for Taylor Swift's music, and I don't think I could identify a Taylor Swift song as opposed to somebody else's song. No. Over the last 30 years, and
although you could get Dan Fogelberg and Jim Croce, you could nail those.
Oh, please. I could probably sing most of their lyrics. Croce, definitely. Even Fogelberg, I used to know all because I'd sing along in the car, right? I love those guys. That was my era too. And the music, I remember, when my dad and my mom were saying, "Oh, this music sounds the same." Well, it really does, largely because it hasn't changed. The style hasn't really changed much. It had 30 years of hip hop, and it's pretty much the same as it's been for the last 30 years. And Taylor Swift is just extremely successful at that. And the difference is between her music and some other music is that it's just basically vocal quality, right? Beyonce, Taylor Swift, these are singers that actually have, strong vocal qualities, so they're identifiable. But I mean, the style of music isn't all that different. But my granddaughters love Taylor Swift. And what brought my attention to Taylor Swift wasn't so much her music, wasn't even so much the Taylor Swift phenomenon. It wasn't even that stupid moment when Kanye West interrupted her from getting an award. I forget which one it was. I think maybe it was a Grammy, or maybe it was a People's Choice or something like that. Got up on stage, interrupted it to basically promote, to say Beyonce should have gotten it or something. I forget, this is several years ago. And which this may be like 10, 12 years ago. But what really kind of did it for me with Taylor Swift wasn't so much even the classy way in which she handled that, but the fact that she took a guy to court for grabbing her ass during a promotional appearance. And I think it was in Denver. It was a DJ, and she was appearing there, on promoting her album. And this is really, kind of standard operational procedure. You have it. Maybe she wouldn't do this so much now because she's just so dominant in the field. But at the time, she's still trying to get to that stage. So she's doing all these things, right? And apparently, well, not apparently, admittedly, when they were taking a publicity photo together, Taylor Swift was wearing a sort of a shorter skirt, and this guy stuck his hand up her skirt and grabbed her butt. And you can see something happened because they had video of it. You could see something happened in the video that made her very uncomfortable. And he refused to apologize for it. He refused to admit it, at least for a while. And she sued him, and she refused to settle. She took him all the way to court, and she beat his ass in court. And that's the only thing I've ever written about with Taylor Swift. I might have written about the Kanye thing too, but I mean, that I wrote about because it was like, yeah, damn right.
Yeah, and there was some guy that was not nice to her and bought all of her music rights. and so she's re-recording all of her music, so she owns it. I mean,
I
I
think that was a
like,
deal that went bad or something like that. And this guy was being kind of a jerk. But this is
yeah,
why I like Taylor Swift. Is she
yeah, I like that spunky
chart?
spirit.
Absolutely. And look, there's another thing too, and it's a little bit more subtle. When she was coming up, when she was really first starting to hit it big, and this is about the Kanye West-ish time frame, right? There was a lot of pressure on Taylor Swift to start being political, right? And she started doing it because she felt the pressure to start taking political stances. And then she stopped. And she hasn't done it since.
Yeah,
And I think that basically she's saying, it's not my job.
right.
I'm not going to get pressured into it. This is the reason why. And I don't know what her politics are now. I would just guess that
Yeah,
politics and hers are probably not similar, and we would probably disagree on a lot of things. But I like the way she takes care of business, and
yeah,
I like the
yeah.
fact that she
It's
is
all, it's business, and she's smart. When she did the movie of her tour, so she's making $4 billion, and then she
yeah,
has a filmmaker make a movie of her tour, and that comes out for $100 million. But she didn't do it through the studios, who skim off 70% for distribution. She did it through AMC, so she makes a lot more money there.
right.
And I guess she's headed to South America now. She didn't go to the football game yesterday because she's getting ready for that show. And when you see it, I mean,
It's just as well. Did you see Chiefs
yeah,
lost yesterday,
yeah,
and it
yeah.
wasn't pretty. So
No, it wasn't. Um, and I saw Travis Kelce. He has a podcast with his brother, I guess,
yeah,
and
yeah,
he said that he'd like to have conversations with her, but she won't because she has to save her voice when she's doing the show.
yeah.
There's 44 songs in that show. Now, I'm not going to pay, I guess the average was $457 for a ticket. I'm not going to pay $40 for a ticket because I don't care, and you don't get to hear the music anyway because everyone's screaming. But I just like the spirit. I like the determination. The energy is just, I mean, it's infectious. So I thought, yeah, it's positive. Why not write something positive instead of crapping on Joe Biden?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, because we can do that all day long, right? I mean, but
Yeah,
this is
yeah,
something interesting. Yeah, the NFL thing, I think, is interesting too because um, people are uh, tired of the
yeah,
politics
yeah,
in sports, and I think especially now that um, Black Lives Matter has kind of shown its anti-Semitic ass to everybody, which a lot of us were talking about 3 years ago when
yeah,
everybody was
yeah,
trying to lionize these guys.
yeah.
Um, it's I think it's important for the football for NFL to find something positive, and so very much they're very happy about the Taylor Swift phenomenon.
Yeah, and they should be, and I am too. Whenever I see it, it feels good. I don't, like I said, I don't care about the music, but you're right about the politics. Morning Consult just had a poll the last few days and finding that people don't want politics in entertainment,
No, no, they don't. They don't.
which is not new. But I'm glad that the idea is penetrating.
Well, I think after what's been going on campuses the last 3 weeks, people are going to be very much, uh, very much opposed to this. I saw something interesting, and I'm not sure if this is actually a thing or not. And but I was kind of looking for this weekend. Did you watch any NFL football this weekend?
No, because I lost.
Well, Cleveland played a pretty good game, though, right? I mean, it was
I know.
close.
Yeah, it was close. It
Well,
was
I mean, the Steelers lost too, and it kind of wasn't close. So
close.
there's no gloating here. I'm not trying to gloat. So I'm watching some games. I didn't watch a bunch of them, but I watch NFL Red Zone, right? Which is
Oh
commercial
yeah,
free. It's like $5 a month. It's commercial free, and they just keep going through different live clips
I
of
love that.
live
I
action
love
shows.
that.
And
And
it's
I
great.
love, it was the Andrew Siciliano. I love him.
Yeah, and look, I mean, I don't get a chance to see my team, usually play, although they were actually on locally and the game wasn't going well. So I flipped back. So I didn't have to
Yeah.
watch the rest of it after Kenny Pickett
You know
got
what I do, Ed? I tape it and I watch the score online. And if it's good, I'll go watch the tape. If it isn't, the hell with it. I don't. I've had enough losing in my life. I don't need to do this.
This is great wisdom from the steward of Swifty Nation. I'm just saying that right now. But I did notice something. I did notice something. And I just want you to check me on this. For the last 3 years, we've had all of these, CRT and Black Lives Matter inspired sayings on the back of helmets, right? On that little lip at the bottom of the helmets.
Yeah.
And I didn't see any of it this weekend. And granted, I mean, I wasn't doing a deep study on this, but I was kind of looking for it, after what's been going on the last couple of weeks to see just how long these things would survive. Now, I did still see the end racism stripes on the end zones. Those are probably going to take longer to get rid of. But I was noticing a lot of blank rubber guards on the back of the helmets, or the team name like Los Angeles Chargers on the back of there, rather than the end racism. And
I hadn't noticed that, but that's a good point. Yeah.
I think that the NFL has decided that this is as good a time as any to try to
Back off.
extricate itself from something that's going to be a huge problem. And so yeah, I think the politics of the left are getting toxic, and that's going to impact some of the things that we see in terms of the entertainment stuff that you're talking about. Anyway, Andrew's got a lot more to say about Taylor Swift, because it turns out that he's got like his
and I have a couple of videos of her on TV which illustrate my points.
Well, this is Andrew. He is now going to be the Taylor Swift blogger over.
A new song at Swifty Nation.
Swifty Nation. That's it. That's Andrew is going to be the steward of Swifty Nation.
And I also pointed out, by the way, she's accused of writing songs about her boyfriends and ex-boyfriends, and she won't say who they are, but she doesn't deny it. But guess what? Carly Simon did the same thing. So
I was going to say,
yeah.
I think everybody has heard who the person is in "You're So Vain," although nobody's actually ever. I don't think anybody's actually.
She didn't confirm. I don't think she's confirmed it, but yeah,
it's supposed to be Warren Beatty. According to rumors over the decades, it's supposed to be Warren Beatty who's the object of discussion in "You're So Vain." Yeah, I mean, name me an artist that hasn't used their own romantic.
Right. I mean, country music. Are you kidding me?
Loretta Lynn's their whole thing, right?
Yeah, right.
Loretta Lynn's whole catalog. But Norwegian Wood, written by John Lennon and McCartney, but primarily written by John Lennon. Norwegian Wood was about a one-night stand with somebody. I mean, this is not new, folks. If you get involved with
don't they tell writers that write what you know? So
write what inspires you, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of what inspires me, what inspires me is really bad media coverage. And we're seeing a lot of it. This is the stuff that, Andrew wrote about Taylor Swift just so he didn't have to talk about this.
But
and just when he thought he was out.
Yeah, but Ed caught me. I couldn't get away with 1 week of crapping
just
on
when
the
he
media.
Thought he was out, I dragged him back. That's a line from a Godfather movie whose existence we will never officially acknowledge. Anyway, the media coverage this is just still atrocious media coverage. There have been a couple of highlights. I think the Washington Post decided to do a deeper dive, at least, on that Israel targeted a hospital story. And this is going to be important because this is actually going to be something we need to be watching for in the next few days. And I'll explain why in a minute. And John wrote about this, I think, a couple of days ago. And they did a pretty good job of saying, look, this was clearly not handled well. And here is why. Whereas the New York Times is doubling down on this thing. Well, Israel still hasn't proven that they didn't target the hospital. It's like, you know, yeah, they actually have, A, and B, the issue is that you were basically regurgitating Hamas propaganda
Right.
before the sun even came up, and you could double check the assumptions here.
And the last I heard, in our justice system, you have to prove guilt, not innocence.
Well, yeah, I mean, look, I mean, I think if the
Prove they
idea,
did it. Prove they
right,
did it. Was it their bomb? I mean, did it have Hebrew writing on it? You know, come on.
well, I mean, did it even leave an impact crater? No, it was left a little dent in the ground, and the reason why is because it was the engine stage of a misfired rocket from Palestinian Islamic Jihad, which they had audio. The IDF produced the audio of two Hamas terrorists talking about it on their command channel because apparently they've penetrated their comms. Um, they had all sorts of different, Hamas cleaned it up and said, "Oh, it completely disintegrated when it hit," which no missile ever does. It'd be the
Yeah,
first missile in
exactly.
history that actually did that.
Right.
It landed in the parking lot and it had about a 20 or a 10-meter diameter range of damage, which is, if you're firing that, you may as well just be, launching Roman candles. That's not a warhead.
Yeah,
And
that's not a JDAM. Yeah, right.
no, no. So, and the hospital was still standing, right? And New York Times
That's the first clue that it wasn't bombed.
was destroyed. The hospital was destroyed. 500 people were killed. Oh, look, there's the hospital. Well, some of the windows were blown out. I guess that's close enough. I mean,
Yeah, close enough.
I mean,
Remember that beer? Remember that beer commercial with the in a sushi shop, and there was a Japanese guy, and they can't say ours. So somebody said something, and he said, "Close enough, close enough."
close enough. No, I don't remember that one. Was Taylor Swift in that one?
Ed, stop it.
All right.
Oh, I think we've
I
done
mean,
her.
do you see? Yeah, I think I've beaten that to death. Yes, I think you're right, Andrew. Have you seen any signs of improvement in the media
No.
coverage of this over since we've talked the last since the
Well,
week?
yeah, the signs of improvement are that you don't see these ghastly mistakes. You see many mistakes, but they're not of that scale. And I think the media has pulled back and they're being more cautious. And some editor said, okay, unless you get two sources verifying it, we can't do this. But the damage is done, and it adds to long corrosion that got much worse with Trump of credibility in the media. The Washington Post had a running tally every day of how many lies or stretchers that Trump had said. And, they're just too busy to do that with Biden, who does several every time he talks.
Yeah.
So, I mean, look, that kind of stuff, people see it. They don't make a big stink out of it, but they see it and they go, you know what? I can't believe this anymore unless they want to.
Yeah, I mean, again, yeah, I mean, I think that's what this is. There was another story that came out the last few days, maybe it was 3 or 4 days ago. I think it was before the weekend, where apparently somebody got a hold of the internal Slack discussion around this, and a couple of editors actually raised red flags at the time, saying, "You're going out on a limb here."
Yeah.
You probably shouldn't go this far in making that accusation, especially in the headline. And the response was, "Well, we say Palestinians say."
Yeah.
Well, I guess the riots around the world probably the problem with that is the rioters probably just missed the last 2 words after the comma on your headline. Palestinians say. These have real world consequences, and I don't think that the jokers at the New York Times understand that.
No, and I don't know. I can't, it's so basic. I mean, it should be just an instinct that you guys, when you do, at least you, when you do polls at Hot Air, the first word of the headline is poll. You don't say, world to end on Monday, someone said.
Right.
You get the attribution at the beginning. And by the way, did you ever hear well, I'll save it. Remind me about the New York Times joke when we do the jokes at the end.
Okay, I will remind you about the New York Times joke. Yeah, but I mean, this whole Slack thing, it just highlights how out of touch these guys are and how much they are trying to forward a narrative rather than report facts and wait to confirm the facts before they actually report them.
Yeah.
And
Well, there is a lot of pressure, but there's always been a lot of pressure to be first.
Yeah.
And there's no pressure to be wrong. I mean, it's embarrassing, but things move so quickly. I guess a lot of people, unless you and I keep talking about it, Ed, people won't remember.
Well, and the reason why I bring up the hospital story now, because I know we covered it a bit ago, last week's episode specifically, but I suspect that there's another one of these that's going to be coming up pretty soon. And the reason why, and I just wrote this, it just went up, is that the Israelis have been making a very pointed effort to make sure that everybody knows that a different hospital, this is Al Shifa, the one that from 2 weeks ago was the Al Ahli hospital in southern Gaza, but the Al Shifa hospital is in Gaza City. And it has been, I don't even think you can call it a secret. It's been open knowledge that Hamas has its command and control headquarters in the basement of the hospital. Well, actually, I think several floors of the hospital now. Reporters have gone there, including New York Times reporters, have gone there to talk to Hamas during the non-combatant periods over the last 9 years. The Washington Post was writing about this openly in 2014 during the last war, saying that they were everybody knows that Al Shifa is Hamas HQ. Well, the Israelis have been warning about that ever since this war started. And then on Friday, they held a press conference to specifically lay out in that compound where Hamas's operations are. And now they're dropping leaflets in Gaza because now the round operation is pretty much started and they're already around Gaza City. The Israeli armored positions are around Gaza City. And they're dropping leaflets in the area telling people to get out. And the warning specifically states hospitals. There are actually 2 nearby, but Al Shifa is one of them. And I suspect that what's going to happen is within the next 24 to 48 hours, that the IDF is going to start dropping bunker busters at the base of Al Shifa Hospital to try to collapse those structures into the tunnels that are beneath them and to wipe out command and control operations. And when that happens, because I don't even think it's a question of if now, because Israel is saying today, came out and said, you have 2 choices, surrender or die. We're not going to do ceasefires. We're done with that. We're going to fight this war to its conclusion. When that happens, I will be very curious to see how it's reported because the New York Times, actually, this is before the Al Ahli hospital story came out. They were doing some sort of reporting on Al Shifa, and they had probably 1,000 words, maybe 1,200 words on all the poor people who were sheltering there. And, I think the issue at the time was that the power was cut off. And, you had doctors telling the media there, people are going to die because of this. Oh, shit, don't go to war. But, but at any rate, they never once mentioned that Al Shifa was Hamas's headquarters in that piece. This is the New York Times again. And I wrote about it a couple of weeks ago.
No, that's too bad.
And my guess is that when the IDF does that, not if, but when the IDF does this, that I am going to be very curious to see which American media outlets actually include the information that everybody's known for a decade or more that that's where Hamas's command and control headquarters is at, and it's a legitimate military target.
Yeah,
I'll bet you the New York Times doesn't. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, the new or the more modern New York, the contemporary New York Times, um, uh, has been very careless on that. I'm giving the best faith
Yeah, understood.
explanation. Yeah. Um, you remember when after 9/11, when the special forces and so on were in Afghanistan chasing uh, Osama, and it was the New York Times who reported. Yeah, it was the New York Times that reported that the CIA was tracking him via his cell phone. And guess what? A couple of minutes later, the cell phone went off. And then we spent,
Yep.
what was it, 10 years trying to find him. Those are the kinds of details, sloppy, classified details that you just can't do. You just can't do. I mean, it's exciting to be able to say something inside like that, but you can't be that specific. You just can't.
No, no. And so yeah, I think you're right. I mean, whatever it is that the New York Times reports, it's almost guaranteed to be irresponsible. Uh, I'm curious about the other outlets, the Associated Press, the Washington Post, ABC, CBS.
Yeah, I don't have that much more confidence in the AP. If they used to be the gold standard of being careful.
Yeah, they used to be the
And
gold standard of traditional inverted pyramid fact reporting, right? The who, what, when, where, why, how.
yeah,
You
yeah.
know, they used
In
to. That was their
fact,
model. Yeah.
the this is a little historical anecdote. The New York Times publishers, they're always family members, Sulzberger family members, and they go through a rigorous decade-long indoctrination to become journalists. And the one who was publisher when I was there, Arthur Oakes of AOS, was his son, who was the publisher immediately before the current one, who is so woke you can't believe it. He was working for AP, and you remember when it begins with M. What was it? The Maduro rebels, or some Indonesian group seized a train in the Netherlands.
Oh
And
yes, I don't remember the name, but yes.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and it's some rebel group, and they held a train, and they had hostages and so on. And everybody went to dinner, and being a trainee, uh, the future New York Times publisher didn't, and he was working for AP at the time, and he was the only one who had the story when commandos charged the train and took it back. Yeah, you gotta be careful every minute, even when it doesn't seem like it's not like it's important. There's a great story about David Halberstam, who was my idol when I was in college, a foreign correspondent for the New York Times, and later book author in Vietnam. He was in the Congo, and a bunch of reporters were going out to the airport because Dag Hammarskjöld, who was the UN Secretary General, was coming through at the airport. And Halberstam said, "No, I have writing to do." So he went back to the hotel, and everybody who went to the airport sent out news that Dag Hammarskjöld was transferring planes, and he was there. The guy looked just like him, but Dag Hammarskjöld was already dead in a plane crash in some African jungle. And that would have ruined his career if he'd gone and because I guess the guy, whoever it was, they saw from a distance. They didn't get it verified,
Yeah.
and they had worse than egg on their face. It's so tricky. It's very, very tricky, and I've been there, and I share the concern. But geez, you got to be careful, even when you don't think you have to be, even when it's so obvious. Like, well, obviously that's Doc Hammarskjöld.
No,
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 no.
no.
All right. Well, we're just about done here. I've been trying to find a Taylor Swift joke, but I haven't been able to do that. But it is time for the joke of the week. I'd even settle for a Travis Kelce joke. Except I think that the Denver Broncos took care of that
Yeah, they put them to sleep. I'm glad I didn't watch that game because I'm a fan of really good quarterbacks, and I love watching Mahomes, and I love watching Drew Brees and Joe Montana, even Steve Young, and those guys who just and Tom Brady just put it right in just the right place time after time.
Yeah,
It's just.
redo it. That it really can't be beat. I agree with you. I
Did
just
you
wish.
ever see the videos of Tom Brady when uh, uh, I guess he was working out and he had one of those machines that throws footballs, that passes the football. Uh,
Oh yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
and he was catching it, and then he took it and he threw it back, and it went right in the machine, and then got thrown out again. I mean, that guy is like a surgeon just to be
Yeah.
able to do that. I love stuff like that. I really do. It's or when you see them, they give the head fake to the left, and then the guy's open in the right, and they hit him because they just know where he's going to be. Yeah. I didn't. I just played high school football, but those moments of synergy and teamwork were just they're addictive.
I agree. I agree. All right, so jokes of the week. I've got a
Well,
couple.
well, I
Yours?
got to tell you that time stroke.
Yeah, yeah, tell me the Times joke. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Okay. So so God came out one day and he said that he's just sick and tired of all the crap down there on Earth. He's going to end civilization. That's it. Everyone on Earth is going to die. And so the Boston Globe said that academics report that God said the world was going to end. And LA Times said that God announces end the world studios battle over film rights. Washington Post said the government stunned by God's announcement end the world. And the New York Times headline said, God announces end to civilization, women and blacks hardest hit. I love that. I
Yeah,
just love it. It's
not even
so
a
true.
joke. I'm not even sure it's a joke, right? I mean, I
Yeah,
think
yeah,
that's
yeah,
exactly how to record it.
yeah,
All right, I got a
yeah.
couple for you here.
Okay.
All right. Man sits down at a first class seat, right, for a flight, and there's this woman sitting next to him with this stunningly huge diamond on her finger, right? And he says, "Can I ask you about the diamond?" And she goes, "Oh yeah, yeah." She says, "This is the Klopman diamond. It is beautiful, but there's a terrible curse that goes along with it." And the guy says, "What's the curse?" And she says, "Mr. Klopman." All right,
Okay.
Klopman curse. All right, so here's another one. Man goes to a psychiatrist. He says, "Look, doc, I'm in trouble. I can't sleep at night. Every time I get into bed, I think there's somebody underneath my bed. Every time I start looking underneath my bed, I think there's somebody on top of it. You know, on top, below, on top, below. I can't get to sleep. You got to help me out with this." And the psychiatrist says, "Look, I think I can cure you. It's a 2-year plan. Come see me 3 times a week." And he says, "I think in 2 years we can knock this out." And the guy says, "Well, how much is it per visit?" He says, $100 per visit. The guy says, "Well, let me think about it for a while." So a month later, he hasn't heard back from the guy. So he calls him up and says, "Why don't you come see me again?" He says, "For $100 a visit, my bartender solved this for $10." And he says, "How can your bartender cure you for $10?" He says, "Simple. He just had me saw the legs off my bed."
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's one of those answers. It's kind of obvious that you feel like, oh yeah, I could have thought of that.
I could have
I have
so lots of
one.
different
I
jokes
have
to think.
one. I have an
Okay.
old one. Jimmy Fallon says, Chinese New Year this weekend, the year of the snake. It's crazy that it's the snake already. I'm still writing dragon on my checks. And
Oh,
there was a cartoon of people in old Greece, and and the guy says, "Oh, it's just crazy. I can't remember to write AD instead of BC on my checks."
yeah, that threw me for a while too.
Yeah, yeah, you were that old. And this is the weekend for daylight time to end.
Yeah, hopefully it's the weekend that they decide to never bring it back again too. But I guess
But
we'll-
this one is the good one.
This
Fall
is the
back,
good one.
so you get an extra hour of snoozing.
I got up this morning and it was still dark. It was almost 8 o'clock. It's like,
Well, the mornings are better than without daylight time. It's the
Right.
nighttime. I remember in Montana, it's like in the summer, you could play a round of golf after work and go home and read the newspaper on the deck. It's 10 o'clock and you could still read the paper. But in the winter, by 4 o'clock, it's dark. Yeah.
I could still play golf at 10 o'clock at night.
And no one would know.
Wouldn't hurt my game at all. Don't lose all my balls, and I'd never make it into the cup. I don't see how that's any different than playing at 10 o'clock in the morning.
That's right. Oh, that's a good point, Ed. So maybe that's why we have daylight time.
I think that's what it is. All right. And welcome the Prince of Twitter, the Regent of RedState.com, the Steward of Swifty Nation. A delightful column. You really should read it. It's great. RedState.com. It really is a delightful column. And I mean, I'm giving Andrew a whole lot of ribbing over it, but it's really good and you should read it. And I agree with every single word of it. So thank you for writing it. And thanks for a fun conversation today. We'll do this again next week.
Okay. Thanks for plugging it. Thanks, everybody. See you then.